Okay. Hello, Thomas.
Hello.
Hello. Okay. And hello, all the viewers at home. This is one of our first ever podcasts. In fact, it is our first podcast, and well, we neither of us have done this before, but hopefully it will go well and smoothly. I've got a few things I want to discuss today, and yeah, let's just get straight into it. Thomas, have you seen the recent announcement by the government, the winter fuel allowance reversal? It's they in the media like to call it a bit of a U-turn, but I don't like that word too much. So on the agenda, I've actually written policy reversal instead of U-turn because I don't like the word U-turn. Have you seen it?
Yes, Artin. I mean, as a fact, I'm all too familiar with the political world of policy reversals, or as you don't like to put it, U-turns.
Yeah. Um, so just to give viewers at home a quick overview of what happened back in July. The new Labour government announced that they would be cutting the winter fuel allowance, which was introduced in 1999 by another Labour government. They would be cutting it in order to stabilise the economy and save on money. Basically, it was a monetary decision, and now, just as of the 9th of June, today's the 10th of June, so we're a day late, but on the 9th of June, it was announced that suddenly they would be reversing it, not back to a universal system where all pensioners would receive about £300 in payment, but to a means tested approach, which it was, but now to £35,000 threshold instead of £13,000. On July, I remember the day when it got announced. Initially, there was a bit of hesitancy from everyone. There was a bit of hesitancy from the media in general. And then as it got closer to September, suddenly a big, what do you call it? A big employee union, Unite, they announced that they would be suing the government over the cuts, which was massive. So, and the fallout was just insane. I think it's one of the biggest missteps of the Labour government. What do you think of it, Thomas?
Well, from an immense backlash, of course, comes immense consequences, and this is just one from a long string of sort of misdemeanors that the Labour government had led so far. You know, people ask, is it only a matter of time before the government collapses as we know it? Or will they keep thriving on despite these mistakes?
Yeah, exactly. I think at a time there was a headline that ran from the Daily Mail. This is the Daily Mail, of course. So we shouldn't take anything they say too seriously. But they did at the time.
Defend
It was
yourself.
in September. They said that the government was on the brink. Well, the Parliament, the Labour Parliamentary Party was on the brink of rebellion, and that it would be. I'm not sure, Theresa May all over again. That didn't happen, for better or for worse.
Well, what we're seeing here is almost a U-turn of a U-turn, a full 360, if you will. It reminds me of another man who we'll be discussing later on, Mr. Trump, as you know, with the TikTok bans, which were then resolved one day later. Not even one day later, not even 24 hours, just completely TikTok back to normal. And it's this sort of strategy that Labour keeps trying to implement. You know, they become the heroes and saviours of their own villain.
At the time, I didn't foresee the backlash. To be honest, I myself didn't foresee the backlash happening. Uh, but I'm not sure what happened. I think maybe I have one theory on this. It's that for the last 25 years or so, we haven't really seen a move like this in terms of cutting and austerity against pensioners who have worked their whole life. So, even in the Cameron years, you know, cuts were made, austerity was enacted, but the triple lock was introduced then. Um, and in fact, the winter fuel allowance was obviously announced back in 1999, but we never saw it cut, even though it was a universal payment. I think it should have been cut, but not down to the rather extreme levels that Labour did. But I think the current 35,000 is fair. But but because it got massive backlash, didn't it? But unions were forming against it. There were protests, and it was really quite a big thing. It might be the fact that, and I hate to say, no, stop me, Thomas, if I'm saying something wrong, but pensioners have more time to protest than perhaps other segments of society. Not too sure. Yeah,
It's true. It's a lot to do with the pensioner makeup. I mean, I believe the means of the U-turn were purely based on monetary backgrounds rather than anything. Labour already know for a fact that it is almost unachievable to procure, the elder community in their pocket. They would much rather stick to old practices such as conservative and even reform. Reform, although yes, that is a new practice, it is the practice of going back to something old, something traditional in British history, something which Labour very much opposes. They wish to, yes, implement a few British traditions, but also move forward with the future. They know for certain that backlash will be caused among the pensioner community.
that's a great point. I was thinking about it all last night. I literally couldn't sleep. I was just trying to think about what the hell did Rachel Reeves do that and upset the country so much. Obviously, we're both young people, so we're not in the sort of perspective that pensioners are. But I was trying to get into their perspective, and I didn't think of that traditionally pensioners vote Conservative. They don't vote Labour. And now they're switching to Reform after the Conservatives collapsed. That's great, because I just realised by default they're against Labour Party. So any fuel they get, they will use as fire. So I think, that just enlightened me. Do you think it's too little too late?
What exactly?
Well, obviously they've U-turned now on it. I hate to use the phrase, but they've U-turned on it, and they've gone back to a more generous system of 35,000 instead of 13,000. Do you think? Because I do think this impacted their election results, the local election results. Obviously, Labour recently got a really good by-election result. I'll pull that up in a second because I forgot where it was. They did a massive surprise win in Scotland, where everybody was expecting the SNP to win, but Labour won. But do you think it will have enough to impact poll numbers now? Because I think that winter fuel allowance cuts were a major poll drag, so I'm not too sure on that.
Yes, well, ultimately, some may argue the damage is done. However, as previously mentioned, they knew for certain that this would not affect the votes. They looked at the demographics. They saw that the pensioner vote was unlikely to be affected. It has remained consistent over the years, especially with Nigel Farage's run as head of reform.
Yeah, I think you're taking a bit more cynical view than I am on this. That's, it was very. I just brought up. It's so the vote was blah 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 blah. In Hamilton, Larkhall, and Stonehouse by-election, where basically one of the MPs unfortunately died, who was part of the SNP and who represented since 2011. And some people were actually expecting Reform to win, but most people were expecting the SNP to take the victory. But it seems like Labour took it with a majority of 602. Which, pretty small majority, very small majority in fact, but big upset, which is, a massive upset, and I wasn't expecting it, to be honest. But I think the sort of, but young people got angry about it as well, even though it was only affecting pensioners. Because I think although the member party is still pretty skewed towards older people, I think the average age is somewhere between 40 and 50 for the membership. they still voted overwhelmingly against the cuts. The biggest failure was in the fact that the messaging was so poor. The way they conveyed it was so poor. I think the real problem was that Starmer simply failed to coherently explain why he made the cuts. He did say Liz Truss, but I think it was quite recent. So they had won the election in July and they announced the cuts immediately. So people weren't tired of the whole, oh, it was the old government's mess thing. People weren't tired of it yet. But I think, when you put the figures next to each other, it was such a small amount that they spent on winter fuel allowance. And, there was so many other cuts they could have made. I think it just made pensioners feel targeted just because they were pensioners. And, as you said, they didn't really have an effect on Labour's polling. Of course, I think it did have a massive effect on Labour's polling because I think the young people and the younger demographics got involved, which I don't think Labour were expecting. So I think we're starting to realise why it went so wrong. I came into this not understanding at all, but I'm thinking it's bigger. Is the new system fair?
I believe compared to previous winter fuel allowances, we've definitely had more generous, certainly. Yeah. Of course, the policy reversal makes it seem like it's overflowing with generosity. Yeah. But one might take an approach and see this whole thing as a facade, merely for Labour to prove that actually they can change their mind. They are volatile in the political world.
But just to counter that, just play devil's advocate, I think Starmer is seen as too adaptable. Flip-flop Starmer at the end of the day. So, Trump-Elon. Now, this has been absolutely massive. I didn't see it coming. And the reason I didn't see it coming is I just saw their relationship as so symbiotic. They helped each other out so much. Realistically, without Elon, there's a significant chance. There's a decent chance at least that Trump wouldn't have won without Elon's help. And basically, for all the viewers who aren't up to date with this, if you've been living under a rock or you've been, I'm not sure. There's a few jokes I can make, but I'm not going to. So, the catalyst basically was the big beautiful bill, the big beautiful bill, and Musk publicly denounced it and said it's pork filled and that it's an abomination, and that's a direct quote from his social media page. Then Trump declared the relationship was over on Truth Social, and that was that. And we haven't had any updates since. It's been suspiciously quiet. Elon has mentioned he is going to create a third party, which we can get onto that. But what's your overall take on this?
Overall take on this. It was a crazy few months. It ended with a bang, then a whimper. Obviously, nothing has been heard since. There's a huge backlash from both Elon and his supporters, but there's also talk of the Democrat Party itself. Apparently there are a few murmurs here and there that they also too oppose the bill.
Yeah. I think, the Democrats will oppose it. They did oppose it when the vote, I think the vote happened. But, it's such a spectacular event that's happened because, we have these two feuding over a bill which Elon knew was coming, Maybe Elon thought he could change Trump's mind. Not too sure on that. And there's another component to this, which is the potential, basically, there's two components for this. I think these two have entered. They might have entered a war, a rivalry, or they might just sweep it under the rug and then whimper away and just walk away from it. Trump's unpredictable. We're not sure which one will happen. If they are going to become a rivalry and war, I think both sides have serious weapons. On the one hand, SpaceX and Tesla are receiving massive government handouts, not really handouts, but contracts, massive $1 billion contracts from the government, which Trump directly controls, of course.
Yes.
On the other hand, Trump used Elon massively in the campaign. Elon massively contributed to the campaign. You remember the £1 million lottery for supporting the super PAC that was in support of Tesla. Not Tesla, sorry, in support of Trump, which was insane, by the way, buying the election practically. But, Elon, and also, this is a bit humiliating for Trump, the fact that a major, probably his biggest ally in the race, more public than J.D. Vance, has come out against his policies. And so Trump is saying that Musk left because Musk was angry about the cancellation of the Tesla grants, not the Tesla grants, of the subsidies, which obviously is paid on electric cars in the US, and now they've cancelled all subsidies. But I specifically remember this, and the editor can pop this up. But Elon himself, before even he was supporting Trump, he was against subsidies. So either he's a massive hypocrite, or which is very feasible, or it was over the bill, which is what Elon said. I'm not too sure about that. What's your take, Thomas?
Well, this whole, to name a few words, volatile, ping pong, dare I say, comedic nature of the situation over the past few months have left the public frankly skeptical of what's to come. Could this be a real duel, perhaps, or are they conspiring in the shadows? Is it merely a public facade? Just a stunt to fool others?
Yeah, it could be. I'm not too sure. From my analysis, this could be the biggest power play from Elon ever. It could just be a mass. Basically, Elon siding with Trump catapulted him. Elon was super famous before and also controversial before he ever came with Trump. But it was on a scale, it was magnitude greater. It catapulted Elon into the public hemisphere. Just absolute. It made him #1 trending on Google when he started to support Trump, supported him on the campaign trail. And now literally every single Republican knows his name. Every single American knows Elon's name. And every single American has paid a decent amount of thought to Elon Musk. I think it was a massive factor in voting in the American election. And the Democrats especially used Elon to say, well, how is this a party of the people? The massive billionaire is supporting another massive billionaire. But this could be the biggest power play by Musk. He has the potential to create a third party. Just circling back on the third party thoughts. Do you think there's we'll see any tangibility to this, or is it just words?
Well, some may argue that was his goal all along, and he simply used Trump as a leeway to form his own party. I mean, sometimes one would argue what two multi-billionaires are doing, conspiring and working together. What do they both gain from it? It
Yeah,
was definitely symbiotic, as you mentioned.
yeah, and yeah. Do you think reconciliation is possible, or is it done down the gutter?
Well, as we know, Elon released a few documents, an interesting nature.
Documents of
Apologies,
in very interesting nature. Yeah.
deleted very soon. But there's also arguments to suggest not much damage is done. I mean, again, this was sort of already confirming previous suspicions that the public already had. I mean, for some, it's no big shock. Even in an ever-going political world, we have seen history repeat itself. One prime example of this is Colonel Gaddafi, an ex-leader of Libya, who primed his skill alongside Tony Blair's, the current prime minister, representing the Labour Party, formed a rivalry, an imaginary rivalry, and from there merged separate images of power in each individual country.
Yeah, yeah, it could. I think that was a very smart Gaddafi move. Um, good old
Was
Gaddafi.
very well noted as a huge
um,
character in political
yeah.
history.
Now, just getting on to the last, I think, segment of the podcast, the federal face-off in Los Angeles. For viewers who aren't up to date on this, basically widespread federal ICE raids. The immigration office was raiding homes in Los Angeles, cracking down on illegal immigration. And then protests happened, partly because of they were cracking down on illegal immigration, partly because Trump suspended habeas corpus. For people who don't know what habeas corpus is, it is basically a right for due process in proceedings. It's the obligation that the government must show reasonable grounds for arresting somebody, without which they could arrest anyone for an indefinite amount of time. And Trump suspended one of the core principles of Western law in his country, in the land of freedom. So, and then obviously the governor of not LA, sorry, of California, Newsom, Gavin Newsom, he basically said he denounced Trump's actions for calling in the National Guard, which is the first time it's happened in 60 years. And in fact, just this morning, Trump called in Marines, the US Marines, to crack down on immigration. What is your take on this fire?
Well, it was 700 US Marines who sent to sort out the protests, alongside 2,000 national troops. 2,000 of these grand troops, even as the protests began to slow down and calm, nearing the end of the day. I think it goes to show that, reasonable or unreasonable grounds, Trump is more than happy to arrest, whether it's immigrants, protesters, and this is just an ever volatile change in the world of Western law.
Yeah. I think some very, very, very something very interesting Newsom did, which he used this for political fuel from a PR perspective, which is obviously what our job here is to do, to give a PR analysis. I think Newsom basically, whichever way around it was, there were suggestions that Newsom would be arrested. And then Trump said, when asked by a reporter, I would arrest Gavin Newsom. And then what Gavin Newsom said is, come and get me. Come and arrest me. I am not scared of you. He literally said, stop being a tough guy. Stop being a child. I'm paraphrasing there. But he literally said, come and get me. And I think that's big. That was a smart move by Newsom and his team. Great PR fuel. Because, you have a Democrat state, which is by default against Trump. You have crackdowns on protests. You have the suspension of habeas corpus, which in a highly educated state such as California is well understood and very, very held dearly. And then, so you basically have this massive pushback against Trump. And then you have Gavin Newsom leading the charge, saying, I'm not scared of you. Come and arrest me. Some beautiful PR magic going on there, isn't there, Thomas?
Yes, every tabloid picked up those quotes from Newsom himself. And I feel like those will have a long-lasting effect on his public image, which he
Yeah,
was very well aware of, hence he chose his wording carefully when
yeah,
choosing to pursue those words exactly.
yeah,
Well, at first, his power play may seem a bit risky, on a whim, heat of the moment, as some may say, but this was as cold and as calculated as ever. He planned the long game, and it successfully went into his favour, some may argue, although, yes, it will have long lasting effects on the view of LA and California as a whole.
Yeah,
And at the moment, it's uncertain what those effects may be, the implications of the lawsuit.
yeah. There's massive constitutional questions at play, which,
Yeah.
if at this from a slightly more nuanced perspective, at this point, whatever Trump does, I don't think his base is going to care. But if his base was slightly more reasonable, and they're obviously very traditionalist, and they held the Constitution very dearly to heart. This is a question of federal versus state power, if we look at it from a policy perspective. And normally, very traditionalists, more constitutionalists, favor the state over the federal government. Republicans have been arguing for years. In fact, Trump himself has argued for a smaller government. So, from a policy perspective, isn't this a bit hypocritical for for Trump supporters to support a federal abuse of power over the state?
I suppose it
Yeah,
may seem a little hypocritical.
yeah. Um, I think that's pretty much wrapping up. Um, just to quote Newsom some more, because I love quoting him. He accused the president of an illegal takeover and an unmistakable step towards authori- authoritarianism. Um, if I can string together more than 3 words at a time. That's big, isn't it? I guess we just need to see how that unfolds. Any final remarks?
If our remarks, suppose, although we leap from one topic to another, I suppose our political world isn't so different from the American world. I mean, obviously, this is a given. Um, you know, when PR stunts are taken into account, they are very big play internationally in the world of politics. You will see them everywhere you go, especially, I'd say, with Trump and Keir Starmer too. The thing you mentioned about, what was it now? It's just escaped my mind. About being hypocritical, being a
Yeah,
sort of in a flip flop state, playing
yeah,
devil's advocate, huge in the political world. Has many advantages, also many dangerous implications, but who's to say how the future will unfold in both scenarios?
yeah. And I think that we're getting slightly off topic here, but with Nigel Farage, he recently came out and supported the nationalization of British Steel, which is a
Oh,
very
yeah.
left wing move. Even the Labour government didn't support that happening. I think he mostly did it in spite of the Labour government. The reason he did it was in spite of the Labour government. Basically, whatever Labour does, if Labour swings right, then Nigel Farage will swing left. And, you know, unfortunately, press didn't see it as a flip flop from Farage, but more of a, oh, he's being so pragmatic, isn't he? Which is very unusual for the leader. Um, yeah, I guess we do see. You're right. They do have quite similarities with the UK and US. To see what unfolds. So thank you, viewers, for joining in on our first ever podcast. If it was a bit of a mess, we do apologize. If it was amazing, then we don't apologize. Of course, I would never apologize for being amazing, nor should you. Just saying. If any suggestions, if you want to suggest any topics to discuss, if you have any questions about anything, do let us know. I promise I will try to read every single comment and every single suggestion that comes our way. What I mean, the way that I will hand them all over to Thomas and he will read them. That's basically what will happen. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, see you guys all next time.
Signing off. See you.